Born in 1949 and in Duluth. I grew up, lived on Raleigh Street for a while, then my dad bought a place outside of Proctor where I eventually went to school. By then I was dating my wife, my to-be wife, and I was flipping hamburgers at Henry's Hamburgers, and I thought there's got to be some more to life than this, and so I saw the Marine Corps drill team on television. They had the dress whites on, and I thought, boy, that's really sharp. I love their uniform, so I got up and went down to the Marine Corps recruiting office and joined for 2 years. The training itself wasn't all that difficult. I was a boxer. I played judo for several years and wrestled and did a lot of individual cross-country sports and that type of thing. So I was in really great shape. The mental process was scary. It was a lot different than today. It was pretty brutal. Well, coming out of boot camp, you receive your MOS, which is your military occupation specialty, and mine was a machine gunner. And I remember calling my dad on the phone and saying, "Dad, I just got my MOS, and I'm a machine gunner." And he says, "Well, why are you so happy about that?" And I says, "Well, you don't have to walk point. You're always like 7 or 8 guys back in the line. So, because so many point men got shot right off the bat. So, but he kind of grumbled something like I didn't know what I was talking about, which I didn't. And so then went through after boot camp went through what they call infantry training, several weeks of infantry training, and then machine gun school, and then staging, getting ready to go to Vietnam, and then off to Vietnam. And we got off the plane, and everybody was looking around trying to figure if they'd be dodging bullets, and it was just like really quiet for an airport. And they took us about 2 or 3 blocks away in a kind of an underground Quonset hut type of thing that was sandbagged up, and I can remember the smells. It was just terrible. It was like rotten fecal matter and things like that. And it was steaming hot. It was probably 110 or 112 degrees, and we had stateside what they call utilities, and not the jungle utilities that would dry in the air. These were real heavy, thick stuff, and everybody was sweating, and we could look out the window and we could see the planes loading, and they just kept us there for a couple hours, and I watched our plane that we just got off with, that they were loading the caskets coming back. And it seemed about as many people that got off that plane were hauling coffins back to the United States. So it was a real eye-opener. I got with the machine gun team that was securing a highway, and it was really pretty much a perimeter, and you checked identification cards and you provided security. Well, I was only there about 3 weeks, and then my outfit, the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, was activated as a battalion landing team. And they took us all out of Vietnam, put us on ships back to the Philippine Islands. We refitted and regrouped and add people to our roster. And then our job was to go into all the places that where people were being hit real hard. So our job was to bail people out, either by helicopter, by Amtrak, or whatever. And so I guess that would be my typical day, was out in the bush. We didn't have a rear area. Most Vietnam vets will say, well, I was in camp this or camp that or fort this or fort that. And we were always out in the bush. Normally, about every month or so, that we would come back in on board a ship, throw our clothes away, and take a shower, maybe the first one in 6 weeks or a month, and get refitted and new ammo and cleaned up. And most of the guys would be full of jungle rot and sores and who knows what, worms and everything from drinking the water. And so the average day would be getting up about 4:30 in the morning, unwrapping yourself out of a poncho, liner, which is like a big tarp to keep the mosquitoes off you, and never took my boots off. You see a lot of times in pictures that guys are sitting around with their boots off. You don't want to be out in the bush and get hit and not have your boots on. And so you were pretty much dressed the way you were for the day. Maybe washed your face if you had any water, and you'd hear them holler, "Saddle up." About every third or fourth day, we'd run into an ambush of some kind or run into the enemy. And that's when being back in the line as a machine gunner, most of the time, for some reason, the enemy didn't figure out that if they waited for half of your people to go through the ambush, they could split you in half and do some damage. Normally, they shot the first 2 or 3 Marines that were there, and so then machine gunners don't do anything until they're told to. So when the firing starts, you drop, you start snapping on extra ammo. My gunner would carry maybe 100 rounds attached to the machine gun. I would carry 700 rounds, and that's 49 pounds of ammunition. And we would snap on a couple extra 100 rounds. We would take cover and we would lay there. And I remember the first couple of times they said, "Well, what do we do?" And the gunners would say, "We don't do anything until they say guns up." And maybe a third of the time they never called for guns up. It would be an ambush of, maybe 1 or 2 people injured or something like that, and they didn't need an assault. So we'd sit there till they called guns up, and then we had probably 6 gun teams of 4 guys. So we'd have 24 guys ready to fan out and open up with automatic fire. So my gunner was kind of a crazy hillbilly, and he wasn't married, but I had got married by that time. And he'd kind of kneel up and he'd grab me by the back of the head and try to push me down. And I said, "Leave me alone." And he'd say, "You're married, get your head down." So we always have a running commentary of who should be watching what. I was on the right-hand side of the machine gun with my left arm over the barrel of the gun, and as they started sweeping up the hill. And the first round that was fired was by their sniper, and it went through my shirt and under my armpit, and then the second shot, as he tried to finish the job, hit in front of me. I remember getting splattered in the face with gravel and stuff like that. But so that was my luckiest day. Had I been right-handed and been on the other side of the gun, it would have been a perfect shot. There was a couple of battalions of North Vietnamese over there firing at us, and so we had a lot of took a lot of casualties on the way in. And I wasn't with my hillbilly buddy. He was with a different gun team at the time, and through the smoke and everything, I can't remember how everybody got. My gun team, the guys on my gun team were killed, and so I was the team leader at the time, and so there I am without a gun team and that. So my friend Huggins, the hillbilly, he comes back and he's got his clothes kind of burnt off from white phosphorus from an air spotter, and he's in tatters. He looks like a hobo. And we grabbed up a machine. He grabbed a gun. I grabbed a bunch of ammo off the dead, and we went out on the very far right-hand side. And we're down to maybe like 30 rounds or 20 rounds in the machine gun. And I had fired off pretty much all of my ammo out of my M16. And he says, "Okay, Bobby," he says, "when I start firing," he says, "you go." And so he gets up on one knee and starts shooting. And I get up about this far, and the gun jams. All of a sudden, it's just quiet. And I fall face down to get back down there, and I feel something ripping through my back. And I thought, son of a gun. It was warm, running down my back and everything, but it didn't hurt. But then I kind of flashed through my mind, well, you don't always feel it either, So then I reached up and I looked like that, and it's all full of mud and sand, and it was my peaches that I had in my backpack, and I had stitched my whole backpack while I was laying down across. And I said, I think you better get that thing shooting, because I'm going to get out of here, So he started again, and I got back about halfway when they fired a rocket or something like that, and it kind of picked me up and knocked me down, and kind of broke my leg and stuff like that, you know. So they come out and they dragged me over this hump, and they had all the wounded over there to medevac. I got medevaced out in one of the last choppers because I wasn't bleeding, my leg was just broken, and I went out with the dead. And as we took altitude, it cools off really fast. You go from 110 to about 50 degrees, and my teeth were chattering. I was laying there, and my gunner that was killed right off the bat, they had a poncho over him, and as we got up, it got windy, and the poncho blew off, and he was kind of looking at me. His eyes were looking at me, you know. So I was in the hospital. For that wound, they cut all my clothes off me, and bandaged me up and everything like that, and patched me up, and I remember the priest came in and got some information, and little did I know what happened is I had gotten married in the process, so they did. My wife was in Orange County, California, living with her sister while I was overseas, and so the Marine Corps sent 2 officers out to my parents' house, and my mother answers the door, and they said, "We're looking for Judith Gaskill, next of kin." And my mother says, "Well, she's with her sister. What, you know, was he hurt? Was he wounded? What?" He says, "I can't say until we notify the next of kin." So my mother spends like the first 20 hours or so they get hold of Judy to find out I was just wounded, you know. So, but the next time I was wounded was only, you know, not too far from that same area. We had another operation later, several months later, and I was wounded by a grenade fragment, and that. And I remember they brought me in the hospital, and they kind of did the same thing. And the father comes out and "Well, I'd like to get some information." I says, no information at all. I said, "I'm not going to tell you who anything is." Last time my parents just about had heart attacks, you know. So we didn't get a lot of the news in Vietnam about all the protesters, and people say, "Well, they spit on me." "Did anybody spit at you when you came home?" Well, they flew us into San Francisco about 3 o'clock in the morning, which I think they did intentionally so that most of the protesters would be home in bed. But I said, "Well, you didn't see me in jail, so nobody spit on me." And I remember coming over on the bus, coming down the Duluth skyline. I saw Duluth all lit up and everything, and I thought, wow, this is really pretty. And so I was happy, and my wife's whole family, most of them worked at Elliott's meatpacking company, so I hung around the house for 3 or 4 days, and then my wife told me, "Oh, I got you a job." I said, "What?" She said, "I found a job for you. My dad says to go down to Elliott's and fill the paperwork out, you'll start." So I had a job about 4 or 5 days later, and it was just like people I ran into, and Vietnam didn't even exist. Probably the one thing that I've heard in the last 50 years since I was back that really emphasizes the whole thing that I experienced is, I heard it mentioned one time, and I've said it several times, is you never get your soul back.